My lovely mug, huh?
No homo.
Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome to another re-review series. This will probably be the last one for a little while before I delve into new reviews. And hopefully the glare isn't so bad off of my window. I now have my lovely AC installed, but I can't close my blinds all the way. Oh well. So today, me and good old Trevor boy
Howdy, everybody.
are going to be discussing one of our favorite films of all time. One
Yes,
that
indeed.
kicked off, in my case, kicked off my love for film, kicked off my love for Arnold Schwarzenegger, and just kicked off my adoration of this entire franchise. Today we'll be discussing 1984's The Terminator, directed by James Cameron. So, Trev, I'm sure you have a lot to say about your personal history with the Terminator, so go right ahead.
All right, so I think my earliest memory for the Terminator was whenever it was on one of the local stations a long, long time ago. It was actually the place where I originally lived, which was, I don't know if anybody's familiar with the cities in Texas, Dallas and Fort Worth. I used to live in that area. I live in a much smaller area now.
It be
But
Laredo.
yeah, anyway. What?
It be Laredo.
Laredo. Well, if anybody wants to know, I'm in Abilene, but I digress. Anyway, yeah, so I can't remember how old I was, but I remember it being on one of the local stations some time ago. And it was the part where the Terminator is fixing his eye, or he's not really fixing it. He's basically realizing that it's fucked up and that he's going to have to cover it somehow. And they obviously edited it a little bit, but I remember my dad, he would sometimes occasionally let me know if there was something that was probably going to be maybe a little bit intense or something, just to let me know that it wasn't real, stuff like that. And I remember that moment in particular from the first movie. My dad actually watched the first two movies a whole lot, and I didn't realize it when I was a kid. There were different parts here and there. There was one time he was watching it. I think it was his DVD, where it was the scene where Kyle and Sarah have just escaped from the police station and they're hiding out under a bridge and talking for a little bit. I remember him watching it at that moment.
Your dad seems like a cool guy.
Well, thank you. I'll let him know that. He'll probably be tickled.
He seems like he has good taste in film.
Yeah, not to diverge too much, but my taste in movies come from him, but my appreciation for them, like my critiquing and whatnot, comes from my mom, because she's a very not analytical person, but she's kind of deep, for lack of a better term. So
Insightful?
I kind of approach them. Insightful. There we go. Yeah, she's very insightful. So I get that from her. So my tastes are from my dad, but my insight is from my mom. But anyway, yeah, so the first time I actually sat down and watched it with him proper, I do believe, it was, again, his DVD, because I started being intrigued, because I remember him watching, like, the bonus features and whatnot for the first two movies, and I believe, in fact, the DVD copy that I have is another version of that special edition from the early 2000s, I do believe. There's like a slideshow with, or a gallery of pictures of behind-the-scenes stuff,
Mm-hmm.
I remember him watching one time, and I started getting very intrigued, and I wanted to know what these movies he was watching were. So yeah, we the first time we actually sat down and watched it proper, I do believe we watched the DVD, his DVD, on a DVD-ROM. We had an old IBM Windows 95 or 98 computer, and we put it in there and watched it through the DVD-ROM. Yeah, and we watched, I think, up to maybe like right whenever Kyle and Sarah go to the police station, and then we had to leave and go do something. So it was kind of left hanging there for a little bit, but we eventually did finish it. And yeah, it was quite an eye-opening movie experience. I think there's one part that we didn't watch, and that was the very 80s love scene between Kyle and Sarah. But I actually, not long after that, though, I was really sick. Like had a fever and all that jazz. And I remember watching his bought VHS tape of it. So he actually had more than one copy of the original Terminator. He might have for T2 as well, but I don't know if we still have that or not. But yeah, I watched the bought tape, like CBS Fox or something like that. Real old VHS from like the 80s, I do believe, or the early 90s. So yeah, I was like real sick one night. And this was like a couple years later or so. And I had actually seen Terminator 2 and 3 by this point. So this was like the mid 2000s, I'm thinking, maybe 04, 05, somewhere in there. Anyway, I watched this old VHS. I was real sick. It was late at night. I put it in, and, I was getting better anyway. Just the fever was running its course. But there was just something about watching the movie that made me feel better, And I do believe that was the first time that I actually saw the sex scene. So I was like, oh, wow. I didn't know this was in here. Yeah, exactly.
Something's happening to my special purpose.
Just say it the least. But anyway, so that was one of the memorable times watching the movie. I've actually, I think, watched the VHS a couple times since then, but I did eventually get the DVD, which is one of my prized possessions. I do want to get a Blu-ray of it at some point. I'm just not sure which edition to get.
One that works.
Well, yeah, one that works. That's the bare essentials. But no, I'll probably go into this more with T2 and whatnot, because my dad did watch T2 more often, because it's kind of the same thing with Alien and Aliens. He likes the first two movies, but he leans more towards the second ones. And I just remember him watching Aliens and T2 a lot more, but he still would occasionally watch, the first Alien or the first Terminator. I just have a lot of, I won't say countless, but, I'd have to think on them to remember just the different memories watching those first three movies, which is funny given my feelings on the third one. Very nostalgic, those three in particular. But I've just seen the original Terminator several times since. That DVD is one of my favorites in my collection. His copy, the cover, how you can like flip cover arts and whatnot.
Yep.
His copy's a little bit, it looks like it was in rougher shape, like he might have got it out of like a bargain bin or something like that. So like the cover is kind of sticking out of the slip that's usually underneath.
Oh, yep. I got you.
Yeah, so it looked a little like it'd been used or whatnot. But anyway, just lots of memories about the Terminator. I think that's pretty much like the bare essentials of my history with it. I've seen it many times since then.
As have I.
Yeah, and as I get into my pros, I'll probably elaborate why it's my favorite of the series still. But yeah, just good stuff. This is a classic.
Mm-hmm. Agree. This is no longer my favorite of the whole series. I will admit that. This kind of shows my hand fairly early on discussing the Terminator franchise, which to reiterate, me and Trev will be, Jackie Boy will be joining me for Terminator 3, but me and Trev will be talking about T1, T2, and T-Salvation once again. Not doing Genesis or Dark Fate, even though we could, because looking back, those reviews are slightly rough, as much as I love our Dark Fate review, but whatever.
Maybe sometime in the future.
Wink, wink. So, the Terminator franchise is one of my absolute favorites in all of cinema. And I hold such a special place in my heart for the Terminator franchise because it's one of three franchises that I remember watching as a very young child. Terminator, Star Wars, 4 actually, Jurassic Park, and the Godzilla franchise, because I was watching Godzilla even as a very young lad. And
I'm kind of the same.
It's very debatable what was the very first movie that I ever remember seeing as a child. But to the best of my knowledge, I can narrow it down to a few possibilities. The 1999 Mummy film with Brendan Fraser, Jurassic Park 3, or the first Jurassic Park, Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars The Phantom Menace, Jim Carrey's The Mask, True Lies, and of course, Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So, also spoilers, Terminator 2 was the very first of the Terminator franchise I ever saw, and the one that I rewatched the most as a young one. But specifically regarding the original Terminator, obviously I knew that there was a first movie because 2 is in the title of the second film. And of course, I always wondered what happened in the first film. I first saw the DVD of the original Terminator when I was at a woman named Jennifer. She used to babysit me as a child. And her husband had a pretty big movie collection at the time. And he liked all the classics too, like Rambo, Total Recall, RoboCop, Mission Impossible. Or not Mission Impossible. Yeah, Mission Impossible. Yeah, he liked a lot of classic action movies. And then I noticed and he had like, you know those movie towers that they used to have? They're like really skinny and they're just enough to have like one slot so tall. You can just put a bunch of movies or CDs in those.
Oh, yeah.
He had like 4 or 5 of those things, and I was looking at one. I wasn't allowed to watch the movies except for stuff that was for kids, but I just like to look at them. And I saw, oh, is that what it's called? The Terminator? Okay, that must be the first one. But I saw the first Terminator movie when I was at my stepmom's dad's place. He also had a whole shit ton of classic movies, including Predator, Predator 2, Jurassic Park 1, 2, and 3, as well as Terminator 2, Terminator 3. More on that when I get to Terminator 3. And, of course, the original Terminator. It was also there when I watched the original RoboCop for the first time. And then after that, I wanted to watch the first Terminator. And I remember sitting down and watching it, and I was just like glued to the screen. I was so blown away. I thought, honestly, it was one of the greatest movies I'd ever seen in my life at the time. It was so different, but also so familiar from the first Terminator. I just felt like I was watching I was having an experience watching the first Terminator. And I got the first Terminator on VHS, and I rewatched the shit out of that movie. Kind of drove my mom nuts, but that's one of few movies that my mom also kind of likes too, so she kind of just got over it. And I remember also that the Terminator trilogy at the time was the very first trilogy that I ever owned to myself on VHS. So I was like, oh yeah, I own the entire Terminator franchise at that time. And then I got the standard DVD for it, which I love the menu for that DVD because I love the computer voice that goes, Cyberdyne Systems, Terminator,
I didn't even mention that.
Line.
Yeah, I didn't even mention that. I love that menu. Very nostalgic.
I bought that at Walmart for $7 with my dad. And I rewatched that movie when I got home, and I was glued to the screen. I've rewatched the original Terminator many, 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 many times over the years. It's one of my favorite films of all time. It's one of my favorite Terminator films, and it's definitely also one of my favorite Arnold movies. And Just in general, I think it's one of the greatest movies ever made. Made on a measly budget of $6.4 million. Damn.
Yeah, we have to remember that James Cameron is one of those talents that was found by Roger Corman and actually worked for his company, or his companies, I should say. He's had more than one over the years. So
yeah, because to throw out a quick example, so we know that the original Alien was a big hit, and there was tons of people that were wanting to make their own version of Alien to cash in on that success. And one of them, done by Roger Corman, was a little movie called Battle Beyond the No, excuse me, not Battle Beyond the Stars. That was Roger Corman. And I think Cameron worked on that too.
He was the production designer on, I think I know where you're going, Galaxy of Terror.
That was it. Yes, Galaxy of Terror with Robert Englund and Sid Haig.
Yeah, he was in there too. Mm-hmm.
And features a scene where a chick gets raped by a giant maggot. What?
Yeah. Yeah.
What?
Or as one of my friends called it, a dime store xenomorph.
It's actually not a bad movie, in my opinion, aside from that scene.
No, it's not. Yeah, it's got some real good atmosphere to it, too, by the way.
And James Cameron was, I believe, also a production designer on that movie. And he was one of the factors that made, despite the fact that the film had a low budget, he made it look like it didn't really have a low budget. And I know we talked a lot about James Cameron in our Aliens review, but I just want to reiterate, James Cameron definitely should be considered to be one of the greatest directors of all time. A lot of that is due to the fact that he's just one of those directors that knows how to thrive with few resources. And the original Terminator, in my opinion, is the epitome of that term. Again, a $6.4 million budget. This movie went on to gross nearly $80 million in its box office, and it went down as one of the greatest sci-fi films of all time, and it's also preserved by the National Library of Congress.
Well deserved.
Yes. So, with all that being said, shall we jump into the plot, or unless you want to say anything else?
No, let's just jump right into it.
Alrighty. The plot to this movie is actually fairly straightforward. We say that a lot in our reviews.
It's not very long either, but it's well paced.
In 1984, geez, this movie's so 80s. In 1984 Los Angeles, a cyborg assassin known as a Terminator arrives from 2029. Kyle Reese, a human soldier sent back in time from the same year, arrives shortly afterwards, butt-ass naked. The Terminator begins systematically killing women named Sarah Connor, whose addresses it finds in the telephone directory. Oh, by the way, the Terminator, of course, being played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Kyle Reese being played by Michael Biehn. The Terminator tracks the last Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton, to a nightclub, but Kyle Reese rescues her. The pair steal a car and escape with the Terminator pursuing them in a police car. As they hide inside a parking lot, Kyle explains to Sarah that an artificial intelligence defense network known as Skynet and created by Cyberdyne Systems will become self-aware in the near future and initiate a nuclear holocaust. Sarah's future son, John Connor, will rally the survivors and lead a resistance movement against Skynet and its army of machines. With the resistance on the verge of victory, Skynet sent a Terminator back in time to kill Sarah before John is born, butt-ass naked, to prevent the formation of the resistance. The Terminator, a Cyberdyne Systems Model 101, is an efficient killing machine with a powerful metal endoskeleton and an external layer of living tissue that makes it appear human. Kyle and Sarah are apprehended by police after another encounter with the Terminator, and healing itself from its wounds, the Terminator then proceeds to attack the police station, killing 17 police officers in its attempt to locate Sarah. Both Kyle and Sarah escape, steal another car, and take refuge in a motel, where they assemble pipe bombs and plan their next move. Kyle admits that he has been in love with Sarah since John gave him a photograph of her, and that he traveled through time to save her, reciprocating his feelings. Kind of slightly forced in a little bit. Sarah kisses Kyle and they proceed to bone in an extremely cringy, very 1980s sex. Boy. Moving on.
I liked your little moment of improv in terms of what they did there.
The Terminator kills Sarah's mother and impersonates her when Sarah, unaware of the Terminator's ability to mimic voices, in a really good moment of dubbing for once. Wish they had the same guy for Arnold in Hercules Takes New York. Attempts to contact her via telephone. When they realize the Terminator has relocated them, they escape in a pickup truck while it chases them on a motorcycle. In the ensuing chase, Kyle takes a gut shot while throwing pipe bombs at the Terminator. Enraged, Sarah knocks the Terminator off its motorcycle, but loses control of the truck, which flips over. The Terminator, now bloodied and badly damaged, hijacks a tanker truck and attempts to run both down. But Kyle slides a pipe bomb onto the tanker's hose tube, causing an explosion that burns the flesh from the Terminator's endoskeleton. Which, by the way, I gotta say, those tanker trucks are designed to hold what?
I don't know offhand, but a lot
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah.
1,000 to 3,000 gallons, while larger tanker trucks have a maximum capacity of 12,000 gallons. So either way, the explosion off of those things must have been hot, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
Causing an explosion that burns the flesh from the Terminator's endoskeleton. It then rises and pursues them into a factory where Kyle activates machinery to confuse the Terminator. He rams his final pipe bomb into the Terminator's abdomen, blowing it apart, injuring Sarah in the process, and also killing himself. The Terminator's torso reactivates and grabs after Sarah. She breaks free and lures it into a hydraulic press, crushing it and finally destroying it. Months later, a pregnant Sarah is traveling through Mexico, recording audio tapes to pass on to her unborn son, John. At a gas station, a boy takes an instant photograph of her and she buys it, the same photograph that John will one day give to Kyle. She gasses up and drives out into the desert towards a storm as the awesome Brad Fidel Terminator theme plays, thus ending the film.
So, I haven't really noticed it till now. I mean, we kind of brought it up talking about T2, but the Mexico connection starts here as well. So it actually makes sense that Dark Fate would eventually take place in a good portion of the movie would take place in Mexico or have locales that are in that area. Again, why Dark Fate probably, despite the reputation it currently has, is probably the third best Terminator in terms of how it fits with the other two.
Despite what the majority of Terminator fans would like to admit.
Yeah, also, by the way, concerning the tanker truck and everything, Kyle jumped into a
dumpster.
A dumpster, right?
Yep.
Man, that must have been pretty warm for a little bit.
Yep.
Because it did catch on fire for a sec. I just thought about that when you were reading it. This plot very straightforward, which we do say that a lot in our reviews. But I think it's executed pretty much to perfection. I mean, there is no fat here. I don't think.
No,
There
not
are
at
some.
all.
There are some. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say no. There's no fat whatsoever. This is a very, very well fleshed out script.
Yeah, there are some deleted scenes, which are, of course, included in the extras. And they pretty much all of them needed to be cut. There might be a moment or two that I liked, but I think Cameron had a very good. He and his editor, whoever that was, I don't know if they're listed here on Wikipedia.
Mark Goldblatt.
Yeah, I think he's done a fair share of movies with Cameron and other people. But anyway, yeah, I think it's they edited what they need to out of it, and you get what you need to know. And it's really, again, we've also said that talking about Alien, Alien in particular, this is one of those movies that plant seeds that are going to, excuse you, no, this movie plants seeds that are going to obviously blossom into something bigger. Of course, in the Terminator franchise's case, unfortunately, and I'm not going to dwell on this too long, it probably seems to. Well, no, Predator's pretty bad too. It seems like people aren't very appreciative of where the franchise has gone from their starting points.
Sadly.
But again, yeah. Anyway, not much else to say until we get into our pros. But yeah, that's I dig it. It's a good plot.
Well, my thoughts on the original Terminator's story. It really only takes a director like James Cameron in a decade like the 80s for a movie that has a robot assassin with elements of film noir, tech noir, sci-fi, time travel, slasher elements, horror elements, and 80s galore for a film like this to be made. This movie combines so many different elements from different genres, and especially also from different time periods, literally and figuratively, because the idea of a robot, an artificial intelligence sending a robot warrior to kill someone kind of almost sounds like a 1940s or 50s sci-fi comic, just made in the 80s.
Pulpy.
Huh?
Yeah, it does. Very pulpy in nature.
Yep. And manages to make it incredibly entertaining, low-key kind of scary, feel dated, but also slightly timeless as well. This is just one of those movies that it has so many wacky elements that you'd think would be wacky, but it's all coalesced into a form that just feels so perfect. No element of this movie feels like it sticks out like a sore thumb, again, except for some of the dated 80s elements. And also the slight low budget, but we'll talk about that a little later. But yeah, there's really nothing wrong with this movie per se. Sure, it shows its age, but James Cameron is just one of those movies that when he's firing on all cylinders, he'll deliver a fantastic movie on all fronts. And this is definitely his earliest example of such. Sure, I was there's the Piranha 2.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sure, there's the Piranha 2 film, which I haven't seen, though apparently Trev has. And I think I know where he's going with. Had anybody else done this movie, this would have felt just like a cheesy B movie.
Yeah, it goes to show that Cameron early on was somebody special. And even though his career doesn't have a lot of credits to it, I mean, directing-wise, what he has directed, I guess maybe in a way he's like Tarantino in that way, in that he limits himself and gives his best for each thing that he does.
Which is good, if you ask me.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to wrap that up, you can tell that he was going to go places because this is a pretty classic B-movie plot, and there's a lot of outlandish elements to it. But he executed it probably to perfection. Most people would probably say T2 does it better, which obviously has impacted the franchise a lot more. But I mean, he got the ball rolling with this one. So
Yep. And Jesus Christ, James Cameron's been married 5 times.
I don't think a lot of women can handle his ego. Either that or they have similar egos. I don't know much about his marriages, but it seems to be the case more often than not.
Married to Sharon Williams, Gail Ann Hurd, which I knew that. Catherine Bigelow, I don't know who that is.
The Hurt Locker. She was the director of that. You know what that is?
I've heard of it, and also Canine the Widowmaker, and Point Break. And of course, Linda Hamilton. They dated for a while, but they were only married for 2 years. And then he's
Gail Ann Hurd.
Huh?
Sorry, the Gail Ann Hurd marriage reminds me of Deborah Hill and John Carpenter for a little bit.
Yeah, me too, kind of. And then James Cameron's been married to Susie Amos ever since 2000. So that seems like when he finally figured his shit out. He's got 4 kids, probably by multiple different women. Let's see, though. I don't know if he had a child with Linda Hamilton.
Maybe. I'd like to say that at least one of the kids is theirs. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, they had a kid together. Though this was before they got married.
Yeah.
And then, oh yeah, he had 1 child with Linda Hamilton. Then he had the rest of his kids with his last wife. Damn, she got a $50 million settlement. Anyway, back to the Terminator.
The rabbit hole go down. I mean, this has happened before. I mean, there's just such a history to all this stuff.
So, shall we get into our pros and cons of Terminator, shall we?
Yes, indeed. I have 10 pros and no cons. Maybe a nitpick, but now that I think of it, probably nothing that bothers me immensely. So, yeah, I'm just sticking with pros this go-around. That's happened for a few reviews. So, my first pro is going to be Arnold as the T-800. You could say just the T-800 or Arnold. I actually really dig. This might be controversial. Arnold's a great action hero, but it shows his range, I guess, for lack of a better term, whenever he plays a villain or somebody who you're not rooting for.
As rare as it is.
Yeah, it's kind of like with Robin Williams doing serious acting roles. He's good at it, but everybody wants to see him do funny things. Kind of the same thing here with Arnold in that, we want to see him as the action hero, and, that's due to stuff like Commando, Predator, etc., etc.
True Lies.
True Lies, yeah. Although that was the beginning, that was part of his second phase in the 90s, which kicked off with T2. Really, his Terminator roles in the first 2 movies, at least. No, actually, the first 3 movies actually are like the start of a new chapter in his life. The first movie really is kind of what cemented him as somebody to look out for.
Yep.
Because before this, it was just Pumping Iron and Hercules.
And Conan the Barbarian.
That's right. Sorry, I almost forgot. I need to watch those. It's been a while. But no, yeah, so Terminator was the start of one chapter in his life. T2 got off a whole nother phase of his career. And then T3, whenever he did that, it was right before he became the governor of California. So really, the first 3 Terminators kind of have a very important legacy for Arnold's life in particular. But the Terminator in this movie, get back on track. Yeah, it's just a great villain, just a great, I even go so far as to say monster, because he is a predatory entity that's after the main characters. He has presence. I mean, Arnold has presence in all his movies, but
well, yeah, of course.
Very intimidating, but not in a, again, action hero way. This is somebody or something that you would want to get away from, as quickly as possible. And, well, as Kyle later says, that's not exactly easy to do because that's his sole purpose is to terminate.
Yep.
But yeah, Nama, it's an icon. It stands to reason, but it speaks volumes that Arnold is both listed on the AFI's 100 greatest villains and heroes, both as the Terminator. So it just it goes to show this role, this character, this entity is one of the most iconic in the genre, if not movie history. So, and it stands to reason that he would be the most impactful thing about the movie because it is named after him. So yeah, he's undoubtedly my number one pro for it. Pro number two, and you don't hear much said about this guy, again, because of the impact that other sequels made. Kyle Reese is my pro number two. And that is due in large part to Michael Biehn, who is, as we said in our Aliens review, kind of a very, not very, but he is definitely in that territory of underrated.
Yes.
It seems like
he's like a cult actor.
Yeah. Well, there's a movie I found out about not too long ago. I think whenever we were doing our Alien reviews, it was something I think he did either with Charlie Sheen or it was some action movie, and I remember reading about it, be like, I've never heard this before. It sounds cool. Of course, I can't remember the name, so I don't know why I brought it up. I'm going to have to look it up again.
It's not Platoon, is it?
No, I'll have to look it up again. But anyway, it was just one of those where I was like, I wish, I almost called him Kyle. I wish Michael had, done more movies like this because it just seems like, I don't know what it was. He just
Navy SEALs?
The way. That's it. I think that was it because I remember like reading the description or something and thinking, I might give that a watch. And who else is in that with him?
Charlie Sheen and Bill Paxton.
There we go. Yeah, I can't get more 80s than that. But no, anyway, yeah, there's just something about the way Michael portrays this role. Same thing with Hicks, because those are probably his two most famous characters. There's just something likable about him, even though he's kind of less so with Hicks, but more so with Kyle. There's like an edge to him where he's a bit intense. And even though he's like a real lean, kind of scrawny guy, in the character's case, that's due in part to the environment that he grew up in.
Yeah, he's very, very skin and bones almost.
Yeah, even though he's a lean dude, he also is intimidating in his own way. He's kind of a good counterbalance to the Terminator's brawn. Yep. It seems like Cameron kind of reused this, but kind of flipped it a little bit for T2 whenever he made the T1000 the lean, more thin type of character. Of course, in that case, he was the villain, and then the brawny, Rock, for lack of a better term, was the hero in that case. Here, it raises the stakes by making our hero, the person we're rooting for, clearly physically outmatched by the villain of the movie, the Terminator. But he's still scrappy. He's still he thinks on his feet. That's something that both me and Nick seem to like about a lot of movie characters.
Yep.
Is the fact that they know their shit. They're going to, you look to them really in a situation to help you out of it, or hopefully they'll be willing to help you out of it. But yeah, I feel like Kyle isn't discussed enough, or not anymore. I do like the moment in the special edition of T2 where he pops up in a vision or a dream.
Yep.
For Sarah. It's a nice little callback to this movie.
Hard not to talk about the second movie when talking about the first one, and even the third one.
Well, yeah, I mean, we will get into it more tomorrow, but I mean, we can mention some things anyway if they occur to us. But yeah, Kyle was one reason why I like Salvation and Genesis so much, is because I appreciate those movies bringing up one of these core roots of the whole franchise, because he's an important character that you kind of forget about. I mean, he's basically John's dad. Um, the logistics of that kind of confuse more regular viewers, because I've had conversations with people who aren't as hardcore into Terminator as I am. And really, usually, if I don't explain the fine details about it, I usually say time travel, man. It's wacky.
I mean,
But
it
yeah,
is.
I really like Kyle. I think he's a great action hero lead, or even in this case, this is a sci-fi horror movie, technically. He's just a memorable character. I like his monologues, or not monologues, the things he says to Sarah, describing the future. It's very there's a lot of pathos there. It also, paints a lot of atmosphere about what that future must be like. Or even whenever he's talking to Dr. Silberman in his first appearance, letting you know that he's going to be a piece of work, even more so in T2. But yeah, like whenever he's telling about how the Terminator can't be bargained with or can't be reasoned with, no pity, no remorse. It's a very chilling line, and he delivers it well. It also helps that it's kind of shot on black and white video camera, so it's just a very great atmospheric moment, and it wouldn't be near as memorable, I don't think, if it wasn't for Michael's performance. So yeah, Kyle's my number 2 for this. Pro number 3. You won't hear this mentioned a whole lot because I gave it away. Sarah is my pro number 3.
Fair enough.
She's more memorable and iconic, I guess you'd say, in T2, for lots of reasons. And we've discussed how I feel that Ripley kind of pulls off this similar character a little bit better. But Sarah is still undeniably an icon. This movie, she's kind of the damsel in distress, but
yes.
Still,
well,
I think. Well, here's my thing: is that doesn't necessarily bother me. There's a bad way to do the damsel in distress thing, and there's a good way. In this case, she's not irritating. I don't think she is anyway. I feel like most people would react the same way that she does in this situation.
You're right. She would, or they would.
But yeah. Were you going to say something, Nick? It looked like you wanted to say something real quick.
I'm going to save my thoughts for when I talk about Sarah.
Okay, I got you. But no, I think, she's just one of those. I'm never going to know what it's like to be a female who has to deal with, assault and whatnot. So I can't say I entirely understand what she's going through, but it works. It's sympathetic. Here's a better way to say it. I'm never going to know what it's like to be the victim in the same way that a woman would. But it's still compelling. It's still relatable. You feel for her. She's not annoying, I don't think, because she gets on the ball really quick.
There you go.
I mean, there's this back and forth where she seems like she's not going to believe it. She wants to listen to like the police and whatnot, and like Kyle's crazy, stuff like that. There was actually something said on Adam Noy's Creature Feature Double Feature, one of his podcasts. One of his guests said that women really work for horror. Sci-fi, they've kind of branched out into it, but horror, I think, is a great playing ground for actresses, because women just have a wider range of emotions and expression and whatnot.
Yeah,
and I
true.
I think that makes them. It's why the final girl concept has become a concept, is because putting a woman in a situation like this is more interesting, I guess you'd say, because you want to see how she's going to get out of it if she doesn't have a protector. And eventually, even though it's in the last act, Sarah does have to eventually take out the Terminator herself.
Yep.
But no, it's just that, again, I'm going to get into this here in a sec, because it's one of my pros also, but it's just that aspect of that actresses seem to serve this genre very well. And even though she shines more so in T2, arguably.
And even Dark Fate.
Again, And Dark Fate, yeah, for sure. You see the beginnings of it here. I mean, it's a transition. It's a transition for her character. She's just living her happy-go-lucky '80s girl lifestyle, and then this horrendous turn of events occurs, and then it just like it would with people in reality. I mean, it just changes their entire outlook on life and how they live their life, really. So yeah, and then going on from that, my pro number 4 is going to be the supporting cast. Not a whole lot to say here because the cast actually isn't that big, but I do like the small roles that Lance Hendrickson has and Paul Winfield. I find them quite memorable. Even smaller parts like Ginger, Sarah's friend, and Matt, her boyfriend.
Cannon fodder.
They're cannon fodder, but I don't know. They're memorable. Mainly like Matt, for instance.
Because he's such a horn dog.
Yeah, phone sex, pretty much. That little moment. That was funny. And Ginger, like the rapport that she has with Sarah. It's just, I guess what's compelling about the movie is the fact that these two girls are just having like a blast being young girls in the 80s, and then just to see that upended and turned on its side is just
their bubble is burst the fuck open.
Their bubble is burst the fuck open. Yeah. But yeah, not a whole lot to say about him. More so with Lieutenant. Is it Lieutenant Traxler?
Yes.
Paul Winfield. Yeah, and the only name I remember for Lance Hendrickson is Ed, because he keeps on telling him, shut up, Ed. We don't want to hear about your stories. I always thought that was funny because he seems like one of those. What's the character's name? Hold on, I got the cast right here. Okay, I'm just going to call him Ed because Vukovic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember hearing that mentioned, but I guess it might have been. Anyway, I just think those two guys have a good rapport with each other. It's I guess it's kind of Lethal Weapon before Lethal Weapon. We just don't get to see a whole lot of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny. They serve their purpose. They're funny. I also like whenever Traxler is starting to believe Kyle's story. It's actually more highlighted in a deleted scene, but you can tell that he actually is convinced.
I wouldn't say he's convinced, at least not 100%. He kind of seems like he kind of reminds me of Hicks a little bit, like from Aliens. He doesn't 100% believe in it, but he's kind of taking it seriously, and he's trying to listen and like, there might be something to this.
Yeah, he's being not proactive, but he's
professional.
He's not a hindrance. Yeah, he's not a hindrance to the situation either. He's trying to help it the best he can because all the disbelievers, for lack of a better term, they tend to mess things up even further
and get smited.
Yeah, exactly. Make it easier for like. This is kind of a trope in the genre. These characters usually make it easier for the monster or the villain to get their way because they're not helping out, making the situation better. But Traxler is one of those characters who, even though he gets gunned down along with the other 16 officers, he's still trying to help out for as long as he can. But again, that's the thing, is that the supporting characters, not much to say about them because they're not in the movie very much because it's actually a rather small cast aside from extras.
Yep.
But they're still memorable in my opinion. Alrighty. And then pro number 5, and I actually don't bring this up very often. This seems to be one of the things Nick notices more often. The action in this movie is actually pretty good. At least in my opinion, like the car chases, even though the funny thing about those chases is that the cars weren't going very fast at all. I actually think that happens more often than not when they do car chase scenes. But it's still edited in such a way that's very kinetic, very suspenseful. I could have put that down as another pro, but I didn't. I'll just say the action and the suspense actually work together very well in this movie. Yeah, and again, also the pacing factors into this. It again, never a dull moment. Even whenever things slow down, it's something that we need to hear or need to take in and reflect on.
It's world
But
building.
then yeah, exactly. And then it just gets right back on the ball, and it's a chase movie, probably even better than some of the sequels in some respects. Probably the chase, the cat and mouse aspect of this movie is probably at its strongest because this is where it all began. And there isn't added elements of like reprogrammed Terminators or stuff like that. Even if all that stuff is interesting and is somewhere to go for the franchise, this is just the pure. You got to survive. We gotta either survive or we gotta beat this thing. That whole element is most definitely in its strongest here.
Yep.
And again, that's a concept that services action very well, I think.
It's at its most tense and it's at its most gritty.
Yeah, it's a constant chase, and there's a lot of close calls. You don't know if they're going to actually make it out. Of course, being a movie from the '80s, it's going to end up all right in some fashion, unless they did like something real ballsy, and that wasn't very common in that day and age. But yeah, good action. I mean, it goes further from here. This is definitely became more of an action franchise as we went along. But still, there's some good stuff to have here as well. Pro number 6 is going to be the horror tone. I actually like the tone of the movie a whole lot. There's actually 2 concept paintings that Cameron did. I think one of them was after his fever dream, which, by the way, just to get into the history briefly, it's whenever he was making Piranha 2, and then he was in the hospital, either due to stress from that production or he caught something during the production. But he was in the hospital, and the fever dream that he had is what eventually led to this Terminator film. And one of the paintings that he did for the movie is actually the final, close to the final scene, when the endoskeleton comes out of the fire, and Kyle and Sarah, an illustrated version of it at the time because they weren't cast yet. The way he pictured them in his head, Kyle and Sarah basically embracing each other like, "Oh, we got him," and everything like that. But then the background from the fire, it's a very striking piece. But there's also another piece that he did, which is show it again. That's one of them. There's another one which have Kyle and Sarah. Yeah, I was also going to bring up this one. Yeah, that factors into the slasher tone of this movie for sure. Slasher movies were obviously very popular at this time.
Well, yeah, you had the original Nightmare on Elm Street, which came out the same year. And I think it was Friday the 13th Part 3 that came out this year. And there's probably a couple others that came out this year. Oh, I think I see it. Is that it?
Yes, sir. And that is James Cameron's art.
You know what, Jacksonites? I think I really need to get my own editing software so that I can show you guys what the hell we're talking about.
But yeah, anyway, there was one piece that Nick showed me, and it's about the endoskeleton, crawling forward. It actually had a knife in its hand. This doesn't carry through to the final product, but still, it makes sense. They had to make movies that were, following trends and whatnot. And I do think Terminator, even though it starts its own thing for sure, it definitely still plays into that 80s horror vibe or slasher vibe just enough to where it's distinct from everything that came after it. And I got to admit, I wouldn't say I'm a major horror fan, but I do like a fair share in the genre, and I'm glad that this movie kind of overlaps into it. And there's an intensity. I think Nick mentioned this too. I mean, there's a grit and intensity to the action, but also that factors into the horror element. This is probably the closest Terminator's got to being quote unquote truly scary. Again, the T-800 is a very intimidating presence and very obviously determined because he's a cyborg, so he has no other purpose except for to terminate. But you just feel it. That vibe. It's very threatening. It's very ominous.
Hang on a sec. So these words are directly from James Cameron himself, I believe. In March 1981, I lay in bed in a cheap hotel room in Rome with a high fever, no money, and no ticket back to the States. I had been fired from my first directing job, a ruinous production about flying piranha, backed by an Italian horror film producer, and I was pissed off at the world, isolated and alienated in a city where I could speak to no one. I dreamt or nightmared about machines with glowing red eyes who walked among us like men, bent on turning the course of history to their own cold purposes. From this fever dream came the idea for a movie which was called Terminator in my mind before a single word of the story was written down. I somehow got back home, don't ask, and finding my car had been repossessed, borrowed a clunker from my father to drive across the country. I dictated the story of the Terminator into a cassette recorder as I drove through the night. I started writing the script in L.A. I drove the streets on rainy nights, seeing only cops and garbage trucks, eating in all-night restaurants like Ships and Dupar's, asking the waitresses what they thought of this idea or that as I wrote at my booth on yellow legal pads. My friend Takao from Tokyo calls L.A. Terminator City because he got the taillight of his rental car shot out on the freeway during his first visit here. He's right, it is Terminator City. On one of the most infamous pieces of videotape in history are two things. The second and better known subject on the tape in the senseless beating of by LAPD officers of a man named Rodney King. The first is a distant view of the T2 crew shooting a scene on the streets of Lakeview Terrace, a few blocks away in a few days before the beating took place. In that scene, Terminator says, "We have to avoid the authorities."
If that doesn't paint a good picture, I don't know what else will. I kind of want to see a movie based on that description, like a autobiography or something like that, or just a movie specifically about making the Terminator. Just based on that description, that I would be down for that. But yeah, not much else to say about it other than I think Cameron honestly took the words out of my mouth because it seems to have translated very well to the final product, while also still giving him. It seemed like it was cathartic. Terminator was cathartic for the experience that he had on Piranha 2, which I should mention, by the way, even though he is credited for that movie, he obviously revealed that he was fired. So really the producer of that movie is the one who took over directing. But that's a story for another day. But yeah, not much to say. The tone here is just very compelling, very cathartic, I think, for Cameron. I mean, without him directly saying that, I think what Nick just read probably indicates that much, is that he needed to make this movie to vent that experience, and I'm glad that he did, really. All right, pro number 7, and I'm not going to say a whole lot about this. I wrote down 80s, baby. So it's funny. I'm not as hardcore. Well, I didn't grow up during the 80s, and Nick obviously didn't either. But our generation is very much influenced by the pop culture from the decade. And I will say that I actually try to go further back, like the 70s, the 60s.
As do I.
And so on. I try to go further back and, find out what the deal was with those other decades. But it's undeniable that the 80s is very much impactful for our generation, and probably even more so younger generations, because for good and bad, that's what they consider old, is the 80s. So, yeah, quote unquote.
Which bugs the fuck out of me. I always have to tell people, you think a movie from 1989 is old? I've seen Frankenstein from 1931. That's old.
Yeah, it's actually funny you mentioned that, because whenever we were talking about our histories, we were saying that these were classic movies, and they are. But at the same time, stuff like Predator, Jurassic Park, all the ones that we've talked about in some form or fashion, they don't feel that old, at least to me. mainly because I've been alive to watch them, like whenever they weren't that old. So, but they are still undeniably such great films that they are going to live on, hopefully, beyond our time. So that definitely warrants the term classic. But yeah, anyway, just to wrap up the '80s baby sentiment, I don't mind. I don't mind the sex scene as much as Nick does. It seems like it is a bit.
Well,
abrupt.
I mean, I don't mind it either in the context of the story. It's just now watching it, it just is a little cringy.
No,
because you're just like, oh, where'd this come from?
It definitely made it. See, I didn't have to really skip a lot of moments watching T2 whenever I was younger, like in mixed company. But I remember watching this one and being like, okay, well, just to keep everybody from possibly being embarrassed, we're going to skip a little bit ahead, and you'll probably know what happened. So, we don't need to see it. But no, on a positive note on that effect, and it is very 80s, but something about this movie that I've always liked is the love story between Kyle and Sarah. It's not talked about very much after this, mainly because depending on what continuity you pick, Sarah and Kyle eventually are completely moved on from the story, or it's just Sarah. But again, that's depending on what continuity from the sequels you pick. But still, again, I think that's one of the things that's mainly unique to this movie is the love story between them. Even though it ends tragically, I guess you could say it leads to the undeniable conclusion for the future. It seems like even though the phrase "there is no fate but what we make" originated here and continued on through the franchise, it's funny because at least according to what this movie tells us, it is still a time loop. You need the Terminator to go back in order for there to be a Skynet. You need Kyle to go back in order for there to be a John. So it's just kind of funny, the ebb and flow of the things that this movie established. But that's divulging or separating from the 80s thing. But still, man, 80s, baby. I love it. Yeah. And this is actually kind of factors into that still. But pro number 8 is the score, or I put down the synth
Hell score. Yes. Fucking Brad Fidel, man.
Yeah, it's honestly one of my favorite soundtracks of all time, really. Not just the main theme, which is very haunting, and it's actually a very emotive. It's badass. It's an emotional sci-fi theme. It just kind of says everything that you need to know about Terminator through that theme, really. Like the bombastic action with the bump, 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 stuff like that. And just the way it's executed in this movie. Again, the synth score, very 80s. It became it went into another form, for lack of a better term, with T2 and from there on, even though it's the same theme. But still,
it's more epic action-y in the second one. Whereas here, it's very, very gritty and dark and 80s and creepy.
Yeah, exactly. Or even there's some themes that are kind of random, like whenever Kyle and Sarah are escaping from the police station, just that very I don't know how else to describe it, very 80s beat that's playing as they're trying to get out of there. And I think Brad actually said, like in behind the scenes, that he actually wanted to just play the main theme in that moment whenever Kyle and Sarah are escaping, because he thought it was a triumphant moment. But Cameron told them, no, I want something else in this scene. So
it's a bit more ominous.
Yeah, it's ominous, but also just sounds really odd. That's the main thing that I've always thought watching it. It's that very odd, very rapid. I don't know I'm not a music guy, so I don't know what instruments were used. But anyway, it's just a very distinct little moment that's undeniably 80s. But everything else, Nick kind of got into it too. It's just a very ominous, very gritty score. I mean, you listen to it and you can feel the grit in it.
Yep.
I don't know, man. It's just one of the all-time greats, at least in my opinion. Every time I hear it, I'm like, this is perfection. I like hearing the theme and its other incarnations as the series goes on, but there's just something very pure about how it originated, and it's just, yeah.
It's more perfection than Perfection, Nevada.
Exactly. Oh man, synergy, people, synergy. You can tell
Right?
Anyway, yeah, the music for this movie, it's great. Again, like I said, one of my all-time favorite scores or themes for a franchise, and yeah, it's great. All right, last two pros. We're getting in the final stretch. Pro number 9 is the effects.
Hell yes. Stan Winston,
yes,
right?
And yeah, Stan Winston. All the full-scale practicals and makeups was Stan Winston. He also probably had something to do with the stop-motion puppet that was built for the endoskeleton, because his team did design the endoskeleton, so it's basically a Stan Winston product. But yeah, just you could say if you wanted to give them a bit of a hard time, you could say they are a little bit prototypey.
Very, in my opinion, they are very much so prototypey.
Yeah, but still very well executed. I mean, especially given the budget, which we've mentioned. In terms of lower budgeted movies, I would actually say the Terminator's effects are probably a little bit more impressive than even Aliens. Because I think all the stuff with the endoskeleton is more impressive than the chest burster. Or
there's more. You see more of it in this film than in the second one.
Well, even then, even if you didn't go with that line of thought, you could say they're at least on par with each other. They're good, but their sequels definitely blew the lid off the whole thing and just went the extra mile. But no, yeah, I've always loved the effects in this movie. Like the makeups for Arnold, how he little by little deteriorates. You could say that like the one right before he becomes full endoskeleton, where we like see his full eye whenever he tells the one truck driver to get out.
Get out.
Get out. Yeah, that makeup piece is a little bit obvious, mainly because it doesn't move at all, and the actual puppet, the animatronic puppet, actually has the eye move, which is really cool. Also on that note, probably something, again, comparing to Alien, I think we're actually going to make a lot of comparisons with the first two Alien movies and the first two Terminators. FYI for people. But maybe not as bad as Ash, like whenever it's revealed he's a robot, but there are some moments where it's very clearly like a dummy, or not an actual person. But it doesn't bother me, because I mean it still has that cool look to it where you're like, okay, that's not real, but it still looks cool. I don't know, for lack of a better term. I mean, it doesn't have to be seamless, because the other movies, that's their job, is to try and improve on that effect, which they do for the most part. Although you could say there are some dodgy moments of CGI in later sequels. But yeah, I don't know. Just the great effects. I'm also a stop motion guy, so even if the full body animated endoskeleton might stick out like a sore thumb for some people, I think it actually, again, adds to the movie's tone and is very creepy and unsettling. But for those who want to see a redone version of that, there is something floating around on YouTube where somebody actually did a CGI version of the endoskeleton. So if y'all are curious, there's like a side-by-side comparison. It's kind of like the scene 38 for Star Wars in the original Star Wars movie, where they extended the lightsaber battle between Obi-Wan and...
yeah, that was badass.
Yeah. Well, actually, I take that back. It's not quite the same thing, but it is a fan project where somebody is kind of tinkering around with a scene that they really like and just playing around with it. But yeah, if our listeners, or Nick, if you haven't seen it already, there is a side-by-side where somebody redid the endoskeleton scene. It looked pretty good, but of course I still prefer the stop-motion one. Yeah, the effects in this movie, they do their job. they might have some shortcomings here and there, but
ow, that hurt.
I still feel like they're relatively immersive. I mean, like whenever we see something like, okay, that feels like an actual cyborg. Most moments in this movie do, even if there are moments that don't convince entirely. But again, yeah, I think these are great effects.
I think I found what you're talking about. Done by Story X.
I think so. Sometimes I don't remember the channel of the people who do it. I just remember the video. Can you pan around and show me?
I would love to do a reaction to these because these look pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. But anyway, yeah, you probably should. It's a side note, Nick. You probably should react to those. All right, guys, and my last pro number 10, because I feel like I've been rambling here and not doing the movie. It's just desserts. But pro number 10 is going to be the legacy.
Of course, yeah.
The fandom is another story because I feel like they kind of do a disservice to what we've got from the franchise.
Yeah, Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. They're kind of on par with that, unfortunately. But the legacy of this movie is undeniable. It's really what gave Arnold's career its next level. It gave it a whole new life. Really jump-started it. It's probably the most memorable thing that Linda Hamilton's ever done is the Sarah Connor role, even though she has done other stuff, obviously. It's the most memorable thing that one of the two most memorable things that Michael Biehn has done. You know, I'm sure he's proud of that. And I'm not trying to be rude when I say that. I'm just saying it's a good thing that this movie has such a legacy for these particular actors aside from Arnold. Because when somebody thinks about them, they think, "Oh, that's Sarah Connor," or "Oh, that's Kyle Reese," and that's at least something. Just the influence that there's not quite as many Terminator ripoffs as there are Alien ripoffs. I don't think. There's still out
I
there,
can't
of
think of
course.
any.
Well, yeah, nothing that's like hardcore, like a direct ripoff. Maybe there's. That's the thing. This movie is very influential, as is its sequel. It has a lot of influence on stuff that came down later down the pipeline.
I used to think that RoboCop was a Terminator ripoff, and I don't think that is true. However, I would not believe like Paul Verhoeven or anyone who did create RoboCop who said that Terminator had no influence whatsoever on RoboCop. I'd say bullshit. There had to have been some kind of like little minor influence with Terminator into RoboCop because the idea of a big cyborg going around with a big giant gun blowing people to smithereens, that's Terminator. Just take that concept, flip it, and make him into a good guy, and then you have RoboCop.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like
and
much the same way.
Also,
go ahead.
In the original trailer for RoboCop, they use Terminator music.
They do, and they're also both Orion movies.
That too. Although, like I discussed with Trev, Orion was much more involved with creating RoboCop, whereas Terminator was simply just distributed by Orion.
Exactly. I've made this comparison before, so I'll be brief. The sister franchises to Terminator and RoboCop, Alien and Predator, there's a lot of comparisons you can make. In much the same way that Predator was basically Rambo meets Alien, RoboCop could be considered Terminator meets the cop movie, pretty much.
Terminator meets Lethal Weapon.
Exactly. And, well, they both came out in 87, didn't they?
I believe so, yes. Yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, there you go. It's just right there in the release years. I mean, similar stuff seems to come out, or comparable stuff seems to come out in the same years. It's funny how that works out. But yeah, the legacy of this movie, it's the fandom makes you think otherwise with how much they bitch. But you know, we don't need to give too much attention to all that. This applies to any franchise or fandom, really.
Yep.
but the legacy is there. There's comic books, there's video games, the sequels. I mean,
the crossover with RoboCop.
Exactly, which unfortunately was just a video game and comic book.
And the crossover with Superman.
Exactly, yeah. All Dark Horse too, I do believe. But yeah, if this movie wasn't as good as it is, in my opinion, movies that aren't great don't have a legacy. And as Stan Lee would say, enough said. I mean, that's it in a nutshell.
Well, there are certain bad movies that have legacies, like Troll 2 and Plan 9 from Outer Space and Catwoman.
Yeah, but those are for the wrong reasons, Nick. He thinks about it.
And Batman and Robin.
Yeah, that's for sure. Even though I like that more than most. Anyway, those are my 10 pros, everybody.
Alrighty, so now I also have 10 pros, though a couple of them are kind of minor, but I have 10 pros and 3 not really cons, but I would just call them nitpicks. Who the hell is texting me? I really need to get an editing software so I can edit out all this dead space. Come on, you bastard. Oh, screw you. Pro number 1 is the main characters. Not talking about the Terminator himself. Get to that in just a moment. But the main characters, specifically Sarah and Kyle, and kind of just the other characters, like the cannon fodder. Well, start with Sarah, played, of course, by Linda Hamilton. I don't know exactly how old she was when she did this movie, though Sarah Connor is stated to be 19 in this film. Oh, he's going to the bathroom. Okay. Linda Hamilton does a great job playing Sarah in this movie. She is obviously very much so just a young woman in the 1980s, just enjoying life and, steadily going through it. She just got out of high school. She's working as a waitress. She's enjoying the 80s excess and all the neo-noir and tech-noir vibes that it has. And it's very fun to watch. And when she's just living life, you get caught up in her enthusiasm. You getting caught up in her just hectic life as a waitress at a diner. You get caught up in her frustrations of having a giant glob of ice cream plopped into her fucking pocket by a little snot-nosed brat. You're just like, really? Thanks, kid. Her chemistry that she has with her friend, Ginger, is very believable. You can definitely tell these two have hung out quite a lot for a long time. And you buy her later heartbreak when she discovers that she's dead. And then you also get caught up in her surprise and fear when, you have a 6'2", 240-pound cyborg assassin coming after you, and there's some random dude yanking you by the seat of your pants and dragging you this way and left all over a city with this robot coming after you. That you buy her disbelief and you buy her denial, but then you also slowly buy, well, even not just looking at the Terminator doing its killings, but you, along with her, come to realize that, oh, yep, this is real. This is 100% true. This ain't no bullshit. Especially when you discover the Terminator is indeed a robot. Linda Hamilton.
Excuse me. The term is cyborg. Gosh. Continue.
Boy.
All right there, tall man.
Anyway, I totally lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah. So Linda Hamilton does do a very good job as Sarah Connor. She's totally believable. She's very fun to watch. She's just very endearing as a character. And she technically, yes, is both a damsel in distress and as a final girl. The damsel in distress elements, they're not bad per se. At first, she is a little annoying with her like whiny, screechy, freaked out voice, but that is kind of endearing as her character because she's freaked the fuck out. But she also is a good type of damsel in distress because she does become helpful and more willing to listen as the film goes on. A bad kind of damsel in distress are those whiny, annoying bitches that just scream and cry and whine and refuse to help. They just sit there and go, ah. Perfect example, and probably the archetype of that cliche is Barbara from the original Night of the Living Dead.
Yep.
Useless.
As Earl would say, dead weight. Ooh, I broke a nail.
Makes my skin crawl. And Linda Hamilton does embody the final girl trope kind of at the last minute. Usually this is when the full-on endoskeleton is walking around. That's when she becomes the final girl. She starts to be a bit more assertive, like she picks up the bat and smacks down a door to get in. And she's also the one that delivers the killing blow to the movie monster by uttering a badass one-liner, "You're terminated, fucker." Squish. Yeah, Linda Hamilton does a fantastic job. Moving on to Michael Biehn, he does a great job as well in this film too. I've said this before. My one problem is that, well, it's not really a problem. There is a part of me that wish he didn't die because this is also kind of mixed. Like his relationship with Sarah, on one hand, is very, very, very well done. But on the other hand, it's also sort of kind of slightly not really forced per se, but it kind of does come out of nowhere. He's just like, I came across time for you, Sarah. I love you. I always have. Really?
See, I don't know. I guess I'm just a big old sap. And probably another reason why I like this is that I don't watch chick flicks very often because there isn't any monsters in them. But this
well, then maybe one big reason why you like King Kong 05 so much, because that could be seen as a chick flick with a monster in it.
Yeah, exactly. So those two, King Kong 05 and this movie, you throw a monster in there, and then it's like, hey, guys can like love stories. You just need a monster. Anyway, continue.
Well, I'm a little bit of a sap myself, and like I said, there's a big part of me that does buy this, but there's that small part of me, this is mostly as I get older, it kind of does stick out as something that sort of came out of nowhere. I'm just like, where's this coming from? Because the whole movie, I more got the sense that Kyle was doing this because kind of like what was going on in Terminator Genesis, he was so close to John that he volunteered to go back to protect his mom so that he could ensure John's survival. And then realizing that he was in love with his mother the whole time, it's just like, wait, really? Oh, okay. Whatever works.
It might have also been a studio thing. I don't know. I've never heard Cameron talk about it. I don't know if it was something that he wanted to do. I mean, I can see him doing that. I mean, he directed one of the best love stories ever made, Titanic,
which Meadow liked, thankfully.
Yeah. Well, good.
Though she says it's depressing and sad as fuck, right, hon?
Oh yeah, for sure. Whew. But no, yeah, I don't know if it was him or maybe the studio. I don't think the studio had a lot of notes for this movie because it was kind of almost like an indie movie that just blew up real big. But yeah, continue, Nick. I'm sorry.
So not really much to say about Michael Biehn. He's a very endearing character. And yes, we've stated before, we like characters that know how to think on their feet. We like characters that are very witty and quick. And I just like Michael Biehn. You definitely buy him as being someone from the future, stuck in a time period that even if he wasn't from the future, you think he'd just be built for this world too. Um, and you buy his chemistry with Linda Hamilton. You buy like his anger and his not really anger, but his like anger and passion to make Sarah believe what the fuck he's talking about is totally believable.
Oh yeah, because he's lived it.
Huh?
Oh yeah, because he's lived it. So if somebody's telling you that you're crazy and you've had to live your whole life trying to survive, you probably take it a little bit personally.
Slightly, yeah. And then like once Sarah realizes, oh, yep, he's right. They start to think on the same brain waves alike too. Like she starts to listen to him a lot more, and she uses like her own knowledge of the 80s to assist in his own knowledge of survival. Is this enough? Yeah, that's enough. I don't know what I don't want to ask where you got it. um Yeah, Michael Bihn's great. I still say like there is a part of me that wishes he could have survived. But on the other hand, I feel like it was his death that was a big part of Sarah turning from wimp to badass.
Yeah, that would have definitely changed up the whole dynamic of T2 because then it would be two parents raising the savior of mankind instead of a single mom. The whole single mom thing actually added a whole nother layer to the relatability of T2, which I think is also another reason why it's so popular.
And the rest of the supporting cast, Lance Hendrickson does a good job as Vukovich, with his really scrawny ass early 80s appearance. What the hell's the other guy's name?
Traxler?
Yeah, Lieutenant Traxler. I like him quite a bit. Like I said, he's one of those characters that I feel like he doesn't necessarily believe that there is a cyborg walking around killing people, but he does acknowledge that there are a lot of strange things about this case, like how this dude's able to punch through a windshield and still keep moving. How he's able to take multiple shotgun blasts to the chest and keep moving. So he recognizes that something seems a little off here. Maybe I should pay a bit more attention. And I also like that he kind of is a little fatherly towards Sarah after they watch the video where Kyle almost becomes like a religious nut. Brings her into a room, says, "Why don't you stretch out, get some sleep?" Throws his jacket over her, and you can see the relaxation in Sarah's eyes when he walks away. And the first thing that he does is lock her inside a room when the Terminator starts attacking, just saying, "Stay here." And he suits up and grabs a gun. So I like Traxler. I don't think he died per se. He was obviously shot, but it looked like he could have survived his shot, unlike Lance Hendrickson's character, who was just gunned the fuck down.
Oh, well, let me elaborate on that real quick. I thought he was dead because there's a deleted scene where Kyle and Sarah actually see him, like right before he dies, and he tells Kyle that, you need to make sure that she lives. So basically, there was a small subplot in the deleted scenes where, little by little, Traxler was actually being convinced that what Kyle was saying was true. But it's also
that could have been kept in the movie. Come on now.
Yeah, if you've never seen them, Nick, you should watch the deleted scenes. I mean, most of them, they were cut for a reason, but that was a little subplot that was going on. There's also a deleted scene where basically Kyle breaks down and says, you don't understand, Sarah, all this, It's a moment whenever she's trying to escape, like she gets pissed off at him, and she's just trying to go her own way, and he pulls a gun on her, and then she like kind of makes fun of him because it's like that would be counterintuitive to your mission. And then he basically breaks down. They're like in a real nice field out in the woods somewhere. It's whenever they've left the police station, they're trying to get to the hotel or something. Anyway, he just breaks down. He's looking around. And he's like, "You don't understand, Sarah. This is all gone. There's nothing left." You know, it's actually a great acting moment for Michael Biehn. If you've never seen him, you should watch those deleted scenes. They're pretty good.
Might have to. Anyway, So moving on. Pro number 2 is the Terminator itself, played, of course, by the awesome Arnold Schwarzenegger. Motherfucker speaks 17 lines and less than 100 words in this movie. And yet he still manages to convey so much character through such little dialogue and so much body acting or body language. The whole movie, Arnold just has this stone cold blank expression on his face. There are moments where he looks very angry, like when he is shoving a sparkling wire into a fuse box to put out power. You can like see this mean expression on his face. Or when he is about to move in on Sarah and Kyle in a parking lot, you see Arnold's face. His eyes get really wide, and he's like, and he pulls out his gun and he starts shooting. It's like, oh fuck, that's an intense moment. But yeah, for the most part, Arnold just has this stoic, stone cold, mean expression on his face that totally conveys that this guy is just a mean cyborg. And to quote the nostalgia critic, he looks like a giant robot, talks like a giant robot, so you believe that he's a giant robot. And yeah, he's very scary. He's very intimidating. He's very badass, of course. He's very threatening. He's just a great, fantastic villain. Of all the slasher villains that exist in fictional media, I would rather take Jason or Michael than the Terminator, because I don't give a shit what anyone would say. The Terminator would rip both Michael and Jason to shreds.
I agree.
Talking about that, pro number 3 is the slasher elements and the horror elements in this movie. Now, this movie never scared me. Like, even the first time that I watched this movie, partially because I was desensitized by the second movie. But as I got older, it mostly had to do with James Rolfe's review of this movie when Salvation was coming out. He made me realize that, yeah, this movie is very much like a horror film. To quote James Rolfe, just like any slasher villain, the Terminator is unstoppable. He goes around systematically slaughtering everyone who gets in his way. You throw everything you got at him. You try shooting him, running him over with a car, blowing him the fuck up, blowing him up again, and he still keeps coming. It's like the original Halloween. There's multiple false endings where you think the killer's dead, but then he pops right back up again. It's very much like a slasher movie. I'd almost go as far to say this is a better slasher movie than any of the 80s slasher movies from all 3 big franchises rolled into one. Yep, I said it.
That's a bold claim, but I see where you're coming from.
Though it kind of makes me wonder, how would Jason Voorhees be if he was played by Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Well, we wouldn't be seeing his mask a lot. We'd be probably seeing his face.
Oh, well. Go a more, what's it called? Go in a more Jason Goes to Hell direction.
Oh, yeah, that would work.
But yeah, the Terminator is badass, and the the horror elements and the gritty slasher elements are very welcome, and it feels right at home with this type of material. And this is a little side note: the kills in this movie are also pretty damn good. Mostly the two that come, or two or three that come to mind, is not talking about the police shootout, but there's the Terminator's first appearance when he impales that one dude on his fist, but you don't really realize that until Arnold yanks his arm out and it's just slathered in red paint. That's when you realize, oh, fuck, this dude is not to be fucked with. And also the very first kill with a gun, like the first Sarah Connor that he kills, just rips open her door, pulls out his gun, and just mercilessly guns her the fuck down. Just like, damn, dude.
Or even like whenever Ginger's trying to escape, that is probably the most slasher-like moment of the whole movie.
Yep, probably. So yeah, the horror elements here are very welcome. And there is another part of me that would like to see another Terminator movie made similar to this, where there's a lot of horror elements to make things a lot more tense and scary. Because this little fan art piece, or not really fan art, but this painting here of a half of a rotten, decomposing Terminator with a knife crawling along is very creepy, and I'd like to see a movie made about that.
Well, here's what I would pitch, is a situation similar to Salvation, like a future movie, but its tone is very horror-oriented. I think that'd be cool.
That would be cool,
something
yeah.
Something like, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this movie, but with Peter Weller, something like Screamers.
I've heard of that film. I'd like to check that out, yeah.
Yeah, probably something like that. That'd be neat.
Pro number 4 is the story here. There's so much told with kind of very little. A lot of it is exposition from Kyle. Just this picture that he paints with words. There's a nuclear war a few years from now. All this whole place, everything is gone. There's survivors here, there. It was the machine, Sarah. A defense network computer. New, powerful, hooked into everything. And they say it got smart. Decided our fate in a microsecond. Extermination. I grew up after it, in the ruins, starving, hiding from HKs. And there was one man who taught us to fight, to storm the wire of the camps, to smash those metal motherfuckers into junk. He turned it around, and his name was Connor. John Connor. Your son, Sarah. Your unborn son. Just this giant picture that he paints using just his words, with the, the kind of fear, the pain, the sadness, the loss, but also the passion and the anger and the drive in his voice and Michael Bihn's acting. It totally sells you on the future is just all bad, totally shitty. But if we keep fighting, we can make it to be a better day. And also it's helped that you actually get to see some of this picture that's painted with the flashback scenes with, or not only flashback, but the nightmare segment with the Terminator attacking that one resistance base in that dream scene. It just makes you feel kind of hopeless and bummed and scared. And you're just like, ugh, this is our future? Fuck.
Nick,
it's very gritty.
Nick, you need to quit it, because you're reminding me of all the reasons why I love this movie.
And this will lead me into the next pro. This movie is very gritty. This is one element that the low-ish budget very much so helps with. This movie feels very gritty and down to earth and grungy and nasty and scary and creepy. It once again helps this movie's horror elements shine and sell this movie even more so. Not much to say about that. I really appreciate the grittiness, and it's something that Terminator Salvation almost had, except for the PG-13 rating.
Yeah. See, that's the thing, and I'll mention it briefly. See, in my head, the ideal sequel to the first Terminator is something like Salvation, where we see things that, Kyle described. But, I digress.
The next pro that I have, hang on, I lost count. Pro number 6 is the tone for this movie. It's a great mix of the 80s excess in fun, the 80s excess in film noir, and of course the 80s excess in action and scares. It's just a really good balance of all of these elements that make it feel kind of timeless, but just very fun and entertaining and scary and action-packed when it needs to be. It's just a very well done tone. The next pro is the scares. There's quite a few scare moments in this movie that'll definitely make you jump. And also kind of send shivers up your spine. Mainly that is with the final scene and the nightmare scene when you see this bodybuilder dude holding this laser gun and you see his silhouette and his glowing red eyes. You're just like, alrighty then. But then there's multiple jump scares in this movie too. First being, when Arnold slams his way into the first Sarah Connor's house and pulls out his gun and guns her down. Also, when he kills the dude on his fist, that's a good moment. When Matt is smashed out of the bedroom door, he's covered in blood, and then Arnold comes out holding his gun. Ginger helps sell it too with her scream. You're just like, oh fuck. The next one is when the Terminator rises out of the hot burning truck and you hear Brad Fidel's music come in and you realize, oh shit, the exoskeleton's still alive. And the ultimate jump scare moment is after the Terminator had been blown in half. You see the torso of the Terminator laying there next to Linda and Kyle, and then it pops back up again and reaches for her. The music helps sell that too, with that really loud and screechy, oh fuck music. That was the one scene when I was a kid that did make me jump. I was like, all righty then. I'll give the movie credit.
Yeah, there's also another one, kind of a cheap one, I guess you'd say. Maybe it depends on how loud your volume is. But whenever Kyle tackles the one cop who's looking for him in the alley, there's a little musical cue that if you're not paying attention 100%, it happens. It's like, oh, crap. But, yeah, anyway.
Yeah, the scares in this movie are pretty damn solid. They don't, well, sure, that one may seem just a tad cheap because you can kind of see it coming. But, yeah, the scares are very effective. And once again, do sell this movie as being low-key a horror film. Next pro I have is, I lost track again.
I think it's 8.
Yeah. Pro number 8 is the action scenes in this movie are very entertaining. The chase scenes, like all the car chases, are very well done. And yes, they're kind of strangely edited because they're, well, not really strangely, but they're cleverly edited. And the fact that, yeah, the cars aren't going very fast, but it's the music and the stuff on screen that sells them as being intense action scenes. And especially when they get out of the parking garage and they're just going down that long road, the editing, it's the footage is sped up. I feel like that was done for 2 reasons. One is to convey that the cars are both going very fast, but also 2, I feel like the sped up footage and the quick editing makes things feel very hectic and frenzied. Like there's so much shit going on, you're just like glued to the screen, just watching shit go down. Kind of like the original Kamen Rider. Now that I think about it, where the editing was kind of kitschy, but it helps sell the psychedelic feel of the original Kamen Rider. Same thing is similar here. The editing is very hectic and frenzied, but it sells the hectic situation that's going on. And then, of course, in my opinion, the best action scene in the whole movie, which is probably the only really big action scene that goes on in this movie, is the police station shootout. Fantastic scene. I think it's like 10 or 12 minutes long, and it's so cathartic watching this cyborg go from room to room, gunning down every motherfucker that gets in his way. It's so fun, so satisfying, very tense, very riveting, very gritty, and above all, extremely entertaining. And the music helps too. Speaking of which, pro number 9 is the music score by Brad Fidel. Fantastic. I actually think this may be the greatest 80s synthesizer score ever made, bar none, by any composer for any film.
Yeah. Yeah.
The main Terminator theme is one of the greatest pieces of music of all of cinema. It's creepy, it's riveting, it's bombastic, slightly romantic and slightly tragic and slightly triumphant, but above all, it's just badass as fuck. And the rest of the synth music, it helps the jump scares, it helps the action scenes, it helps the romance, even though if it is cringy, it still is kind of touching music. Yeah, the music for this movie is absolutely fantastic, and there's not a wasted. Yeah, it would have been cool if the main Terminator theme was playing during the police shootout. I wouldn't be surprised if there's like a re-edit out there on YouTube or somebody actually did do that. If there is, I'd like to see that. But yeah, the music is absolutely perfect. It's one of, I don't know how successful Brad Fidel was as a music composer. It kind of just seems like everybody ignores anything that he did and just focuses on Terminator. But I kind of wish that Brad Fidel worked on more stuff. I don't know if he has.
Off the top of my head, the only other thing I can think of, and
did he do 2?
I didn't always do what?
Did he do 2, or is that James Horner?
Oh no, he did both the first 2 movies.
Okay.
And he also did Fright Night, the theme for the original Fright
Night. I love the music in Fright Night.
Well, there you go. Now you know why, probably.
Now that I think about it, yeah, that does sound very Brad Fidel-esque, that movie soundtrack. Another reason why I like Fright Night.
There's probably some other surprises, but that's like the main, I say surprises, I need to look up his filmography, but that's the main other thing that I think of aside from Terminator is Fright Night.
And the last pro that I have here is the special effects 95% of the time. We're going to get into the other 5% in just a bit. But 95% of the time, the special effects are really, really good. The makeup effects are very good. The blood and gore effects are really solid. The scene where the Terminator is fixing his arm, like when he cuts open his arm, and then you see the gears and such moving inside his arm, I totally buy it. Absolutely buy it. And it's nasty, and it looks gross, and it's bloody and nasty. The sound effects are really good too. Like the sound of the skin cutting apart is really visceral, and it sounds like actual skin being cut open, because it sounds like a low-key, like a soft tearing sound. Watching Arnold pull out his damaged eye and watching it drop into the sink makes your skin crawl, and it just, because you're just like, oh god, he's pulling out his eye. Ew. The animatronics for the full-on endoskeleton look fantastic. Very prototypey, That's not a negative, but I just will say they're very prototypey because you never see a full shot. Well, no, the only time you do see a full shot of the endoskeleton is when it first shows up, like the pan shot from its knees up to its head. That's the only scene where you can see the full on endoskeleton when it's not stop motion. It's also not moving really. But the chest up effects for the Terminator animatronic look fantastic. I totally buy it as a robot. Even if it's a little bit herky-jerky, you could just chalk that up to, well, it's damaged. So, of course, it's going to be a little herky-jerky. The stop-motion effects are nice to look at. And I acknowledge that probably James Cameron knew that they were a bit herky-jerky. That's why they didn't show that much of it. I don't want to say they're the weakest element of the special effects, but they are kind of a weaker element of the effects because they look cool, but you can definitely tell it was stop motion, and it just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb because the animatronics are so good, and then you see the stop motion, and just it's a little jarring to go from that to this.
Yeah, probably. I will admit, even though I love them, the most jarring, unfortunately, is the first shot we see.
Yeah, when it grabs onto that stick and pulls it down, and then it just kind of, in a funny way, just starts walking forward. It's just a little. You're just like, oh, okay, that's stop motion. I think the best when the stop motion looks its best is when it's going down that dark corridor because it just makes it look really threatening and menacing. Though,
really what it is that you get used to it. It's jarring. Well, for me anyway, it's jarring when you first see it, but then as the scene goes along, you're like, oh, okay, this is basically an homage to the Harryhausen living skeleton in a way.
Kind of, yeah. I actually, though, think the weakest stop motion shot is when the Terminator is just, it's shot from the Terminator's back where you just see the Terminator walking past all this machinery. There it sticks out like a sore thumb because it's a composite shot and it's not done that well. But again, thankfully, it's a very quick shot. I feel like James Cameron knew that. So he only showed the effects as minimally as possible just to convey the sense of the scene. And that was it. But it still does kind of stick out because it's obvious it's a composite shot. And unfortunately, this movie's composite shots aren't that great.
Yeah. Budget problems, probably.
Yep. But all the Future's composite shots look fine. They obviously are composite shots, but I still say they look all right.
Sorry. A lot of great miniatures by Fantasy 2 Effects, I do believe.
That too.
In those future scenes. Yeah, I forgot to mention those.
Continue. And the set design for the future scenes also looks very good. You definitely buy that as just being a fucked off, miserable place to live in. Oh, and the hunter killers look really good too, and as do the planes. And the optical laser shots look really cool too. And the exploding HK looks fantastic. As well as the exploding tanker truck also looks very good. The makeup on Arnold when he's all way more fucked off toward the end of the movie after he just got run over. Yeah, the only thing that doesn't really work is the prosthetic eye because you can easily tell when his regular eye moves, the prosthetic does not. It just kind of sticks out.
Yeah, it's just there. It's stationary.
And then there's the Arnold Puppet that they use for when Arnold's eye is moving around when he's looking at himself in the mirror. And then also when he's inside the tanker truck looking around, you can tell it's the dummy. But I just now realized that actually kind of works to its advantage because it kind of falls into the uncanny valley territory where it kind of blurs the line of looking real but also fake. But that also goes into the movie's universe because it does blur the line between real and fake. It's a robot dressed like a human, but the human disguise is failing.
Yeah, it looks appropriately artificial
and creepy.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, the special effects in this movie are for the most part very, very solid. Not every director who gets their first opportunity to direct, to really make a movie, is going to land everything on 100%. But if they can get a majority of their stuff right, then I would call that a win. And this movie gets almost everything done right the first time. So I definitely would call this a win.
Yes, indeed.
Any nitpicks?
Well, real quick before I say anything, Brad also did the score for True Lies. So there's that.
Hell yeah. I love the music to True. Honey, we're watching True Lies tonight.
Good deal. No, there really isn't any nitpicks that are, well, yeah, I don't really, I think we've kind of mentioned them, and you're probably going to have some of your own too. There's nothing really about this movie that I would really hold against it. It kind of adds to its charm in a way, if you're inclined to think that way. Some people it might be a con, but for me, it just adds to the unique charm of the movie. Maybe not everything is timeless, but it's still charming.
Oh, and something I forgot to mention is that I appreciate the 80s-ness of this movie very much so. I actually listed that as both a good and bad thing. I really appreciate the 80s-ness of this too. It just kind of takes me back to when I was a kid. It'd be 1:00 in the morning and I'd be watching this movie and just having a total blast. One of my favorite scenes in the whole movie, it's a quick scene. It's right before the first nightmare scene with Kyle, when he and some kid were fighting an HK. He hotwires that car, and then that 80s jazz pop music just plays on, and he just sits back and he's watching the nighttime construction, and that music's playing. It just looks very relaxing because, sometimes I like to just listen to some music and sit down somewhere and relax and just let my mind wander. That just looked like a really fun time. And the 80s was definitely one of those time periods where it was more accessible to just be by yourself and listen to music, especially if you had a car.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think to your point about watching at 1:00 in the morning, which I've probably done more than once, it's actually a very good late night movie.
Because the majority of the movie does take place at night.
Yeah, I mean, even the daytime scenes, there's not many of them, but still.
So I have a couple nitpicks with the movie. It mostly had to do with the effects and also just the 80s-ness. It comes off as being kind of dated. Not really in a bad way, but it's just kind of in a more noticeable way how 80s this movie is, mostly in Linda Hamilton's hair. And yeah, some of the composite shots aren't that great. Some of the stop motion doesn't look that great. And the Arnold puppet looks like a puppet, though if you keep that in mind, the Uncanny Valley thing in mind, that does kind of help sell that it looks intentionally and also unintentionally artificial. And that adds to its creep factor. But overall, there's really not a whole lot bad that you can say about this movie. It's just one of those times where it was kind of like a happy accident that this movie turned out to be so good.
Yeah, and it has enough, I guess, datedness and genre trappings to where it kind of falls into that category where it's like, okay, this feels like how it should, I guess you could say, but at the same time, it's something more. It's both obviously a B movie and then something more.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you could say.
Final thoughts?
Yeah, final thoughts. So look, actually doing this review, and I've always kind of realized it, Terminator 2 doesn't have near as many things that can date it. It's actually very minimal things. This movie, unfortunately, does have things that you can point out about it, and that's probably why the second movie is more highly regarded. But at the end of the day, this is still an undeniable classic. If you haven't seen it, what are you doing? Get off your ass, go watch it.
It's literally, you can watch it for free with ads on YouTube right now, along with the original RoboCop. Do that too. Yeah, if you haven't seen this, what are you doing? Get off your ass and go watch it. What the fuck?
It's film history. Come on, guys.
Mm-hmm. Keep going.
I don't know what else to say. This is one of those movies where I have a lot of feelings about it, but I can't necessarily articulate it the way I want to. And I'll probably just say that you kind of kicked my ass in that department, at least in my opinion. So yeah, there's just lots of great things to say about it. A great sci-fi movie. It's also a great horror movie. It's a good action movie.
Just a great movie.
Arnold's iconic. His supporting players are iconic. I mean, technically he's not the main guy, but the movie is named after him still. So it's
kind of like a Godzilla movie.
Yeah. It's probably one of the best things you can watch, honestly, and that's high praise.
Rating. I mean, duh. What the hell else could it be?
If we hold the nitpicks against it, I think it's still an 8 or a 9, but I'm going to give it a 10. That's going to be mine.
Yeah, The Terminator is a special movie to me. It's one of my favorite films of all time. It's, to me, one of the most influential movies in my taste in film. It's one of few movies that me and my dad can sit down and watch because he's also a Terminator fan, though he's way more casual than I am. He just kind of sticks with the first two and ignores the rest.
Kind of the same with mine, except he at least goes up to 4. The third and fourth movie, he likes them too.
Oh man, turn your dad into a Dark Fate fan, would you please? Anyway.
Well, he was the one who said after we were done watching it, yeah, I think it's run its course.
Yeah,
I mean, if that's not the most condemning thing to say, I don't know what is.
Yeah, the original Terminator, it's a fantastic movie, and yes, I have a couple nitpicks with the 80s-ness and the effects, but it's still a 10 out of 10 movie for me. It's one of my favorites of all time, and it always will be. And I most certainly will be showing this to my son as early as possible. Sans the sex scene.
Yeah, well, you'll just be keeping on a tradition of skipping that part until they're older.
Yep. Alrighty, Trev, anything to plug?
Yes, hopefully sometime soon. I mean, that review of Gojira and Godzilla King of the Monsters, 1956, is still in the pipeline with Daikaiju Spacezilla. If y'all don't know who he is, please search for him and find his videos. He actually does pretty good content. He takes his time on it to make sure that it's good. That's why there's sometimes lulls here and there, but it's still worthwhile. Unfortunately, a lot of his stuff gets copyright strikes, and that's been a demoralizer, I'm sure. But still, yeah, Daikaiju Spacezilla, Joey. He's doing some good stuff. He's a youngin', but he has some talent, I think. I think if he keeps at it, he's going to have a good YouTube career, making reviews and whatnot. But yeah, I recorded my audio for his review for the original Gojira as well as its American counterpart, and yeah, that will be uploaded at his convenience, I'm sure. But that's the main thing I got in the pipeline. Anything else, it will pop up when it pops up.
Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button and share this video with your friends. And tune in tomorrow to our potentially 4-hour fucking long review of the masterpiece sequel that is James Cameron's Terminator 2, Judgment Day. And as always, go out and watch some fucking movies. And remember, I'll be back.